I wasn't exactly the type of person people paid much attention to. Not in my family anyway. I was the one who didn't post much on Facebook, didn't show off vacations or luxury handbags, and definitely didn't have a Pinterest-perfect condo in the city. I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, in a modest house on a quiet street. Kept my job private, and honestly, I was fine with people thinking I was boring. They left me alone that way. My name is Caitlin Shaw. I'm 35, a former Army officer, technically still serving, just differently now. But if you asked my sister Brianna, she'd say, I used to be in the military but didn't make it far, and now I was just coasting through life. She loves phrases like that, always has. Our family dynamic has always been, from Queen Law School, grad married a big-time corporate attorney, drives a Range Rover with seat heaters that cost more than my entire car, and she never lets anyone forget it. Every holiday dinner turns into a slideshow of her accomplishments. And me? I'm the background filler, the person they talk about in past tense. Caitlin, yeah, she used to be in the Army, did something with radios or drones or whatever. She lives out in Asheville now. Still single, I think. Still single, right? Not like that's anyone's business, but it's always said with a tone. The kind of tone that says, we expected more from you, but dressed up as polite conversation. I've been dealing with that for years. Ever since I left active duty and transitioned into a classified civilian role with the Department of Defense. But no one knows that because they're not supposed to. I don't talk about work. Not because I'm ashamed, because I legally can't. And honestly, even if I could, they wouldn't get it. They think working from home means I sell candles on Etsy or write romance novels under a pen name. When I said I was working with policy and analysis, Brianna smirked like she thought I meant spreadsheets and coffee runs. It's fine, I've been called worse. You get used to it. The only person who didn't treat me like a second-ass relative was Logan. He knew me before the medals, before the scars, before the silence. We served together in Afghanistan. He was part of a field repair unit, the guy who kept machines alive in impossible conditions. One time, when our convoy got hit and communications went dark, he pulled me out from under a flipped MRAP, patching me up with duct tape and adrenaline until medics arrived. That's not poetic. That's just how it went. Years later, we ran into each other again by accident. VA appointment. Same clinic, same hallway, same uncomfortable chairs. We got coffee after. One coffee turned into 3 months, then into a house, a dog, and eventually a proposal. Nothing flashy. He asked over takeout while I was in sweats, and I said yes with soy sauce on my chin. We planned the wedding ourselves. No event planner, no curated Instagram board. Just something small and honest. We rented out a little lodge in the Blue Ridge Mountains with a view that made even cynical people go quiet for a second. We invited everyone. Most RSVP, but not all. Some of Brianna's friends sent back, can't attend, but congrats, with zero intention of ever showing up. They saw the guest list and realized there wouldn't be a 5-course plated dinner or a string quartet flown in from New York. Brianna made it clear she thought the whole thing was beneath me, which was funny considering she never thought I was above anything in the first place. She called me one night before the wedding and said, "Are you sure about this? I mean, Logan seems sweet, but you're really going to marry a guy who fixes planes? Like, that's the plan?" I told her, yes, that is the plan. She sighed like I just told her I joined a pyramid scheme. Okay, just don't expect my sister was always the golden child. I was the ghost me to clean up the mess later. Then she hung up. People like her don't just disapprove quietly. They need an audience. A wedding, for example, is the perfect stage. And by the way, if you've ever had someone in your family try to talk down to you like you don't matter, drop a comment. I promise you're not the only one. And hit subscribe if you enjoy a good slow-burn revenge story where Noon sees it coming. My mom didn't say much in the weeks leading up to the wedding. She's learned to stay out of the line of fire between me and Brianna, but I could tell she didn't understand why I wouldn't let Brianna help plan things. She just wants what's best for you. My mom said once, which is what people say when they don't want to admit someone's actually just mean. She's just very practical. Sure, Mom. Practical like a buzzsaw. Logan and I kept everything low-key. Our ceremony would be short, the food simple, the guest list full of real pop plano curated connections. And that was the point. No one was coming to be impressed. They were coming to support us. But that's the thing about people like Brianna. They don't show up to support. They show up to judge. And the problem is, when you live quietly for too long, people start to forget you're the one holding everything together. I picked up the wedding programs from the print shop and saw Brianna's name printed next to Maid of Honor. I almost laughed out loud. We'd kept her in that role just for appearances, even though she hadn't lifted a finger to help. Not a call, not a text, not a single question about what I needed. But if her name didn't appear in bold next to mine, she'd have accused me of cutting her out and turned it into another family PR crisis. So there she was, honorary title, zero effort. Brianna's always had a thing for optics. The right angle, the perfect filter, the well-timed update about her life. Everything she touches has to sparkle. And if it doesn't, she makes sure no one sees it. She was the golden child, born to be the center of attention. She was the type to run for class president just to pat her college application and win. Not because people liked her, but because she knew how to sell herself. She could smile at your face while quietly disassembling your confidence one comment at a time. I was the quiet one, the observer. The kid teachers liked but forgot. I never minded that until Brianna made it very clear that being invisible meant being irrelevant. When we were teenagers, Brianna got a brand new silver SUV for her 17th birthday. I got hand-me-down boots and a you'll-get-your-turn smile. When she went to college, there was a celebration dinner at some steakhouse downtown. When I got into West Point, my mom said, "Oh, that's serious. Serious isn't too masculine, too far, too hard to brag about." Brianna became a lawyer. I became someone you don't talk about too loudly in polite circles. Military service was fine for people who couldn't make it in the real world. That's how she framed it. To her, I joined the army because I didn't know what else to do. I kept my distance even when I was back home. I'd visit on holidays, sit through the usual small talk, endure the casual. So, still in the military thing, questions while she talked about corporate clients and wine pairings, and I'd smile, nod, and leave before dessert. The only time she really noticed me was when I didn't show up. That's when she'd call and say things like, "You could at least pretend you care about the family," which was rich coming from someone who treated family like a resume booster. Logan met her once before the wedding. Just once, she invited us to some fundraiser at a rooftop bar in Atlanta. It was one of those events where no one actually cares what it's for. They just want to be photographed holding champagne. Logan showed up in a button-down shirt and khakis. Totally normal, respectable, but not to Brianna. She looked him up, and I served my country in silence. No one ever knew down and said, "Oh, you didn't have time to change after work." He had. That washes change. We stayed for 40 minutes. She introduced him as my sister's fiancé, Logan. He's in, mechanical stuff. Then she moved on. Logan didn't say anything about it afterward, but the way he clenched his jaw in the elevator told me everything I needed to know. When we got back to the car, I said, "You okay?" He just nodded, then added, "She doesn't like people she can't label." I told him not to take it personally. She'd spent her whole life collecting people like accessories. If you didn't add to her shine, she didn't see the point of keeping you around. A few days after that event, I got a text from her. "Do you really want to go through with this? I mean, you can still back out." I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen and wondered how someone could be so tone-deaf and still think they're the mature one in the room. My mom later tried to explain it away like always. "She's just worried about you. She doesn't mean to come off harsh." No, she meant it. Brianna always meant it. She just assumed no one would ever challenge her because no one ever did. Her husband let her dominate every conversation. Her friends followed her around like designer lapdogs. Even our parents softened their voices when she got that certain tone. I never could play that game. I didn't want to. What I did want was a wedding where I didn't feel like I had to apologize for who I loved or how we lived. And the truth is, I wasn't asking for permission. I never was. But in a family like mine, silence gets mistaken for weakness. And I'd spent too many years letting people mistake me. I looked at our guest list the night before final confirmations. Half the people on her side hadn't RSVP'd. Some had sent gifts, but not a word. Others had declined with vague excuses. The message was clear. I wasn't worth their weekend. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I just highlighted their names and removed their seats. Because when someone shows you they're not really showing up for you, you stop making space for them. I tossed the final RSVP list onto the table and leaned back in my chair. The silence in the room didn't bother me. It never did. That kind of stillness was something I'd grown used to in rooms with no windows behind doors that didn't open unless someone else buzzed them from the other side. There are parts of my life I can't talk about. Not because I don't want to, but because I signed my name on a stack of documents that say I won't. And even if I could talk about it, most people wouldn't believe me. I enlisted straight out of high school, but I wasn't the kid who couldn't figure out what to do with their life. I had a plan. I wanted structure, purpose, and a way out of the shadow I grew up in. West Point was my ticket. I graduated top 10% of my class, ran leadership drills in my sleep, and specialized in intelligence analysis before I turned 23. I spent a decade in Army intelligence. Not sitting in some air-conditioned trailer behind a monitor, but embedded, forward deployed, reading intercepted chatter, and predicting moves before they happened. People's lives depended on it. I don't say that for drama. It's just a fact. My third deployment was the one that changed everything. Our unit was tasked with identifying insurgent cells targeting supply routes through northern Afghanistan. I found a pattern no one else had spotted: an irregularity in radio bursts tied to weather shifts. We rerouted 2 convoys and avoided what would have been a guaranteed ambush. That analysis earned me a Bronze Star. It also earned me a new assignment: black badge, unmarked building, no last names. After that, I wasn't Caitlin anymore. I was just another person in a room full of people who didn't talk about where they came from. We worked on predictive systems, silent threat mapping, cyber intel integrations, the kind of stuff that never makes the news, but keeps embassies from being bombed. I can't tell you where we were stationed, but I can tell you the coffee always sucked and the windows were fake. After my 5th tour, I got pulled aside by a colonel who told me, "You've done enough. Go home, but stay sharp. We may need you again." They moved me into a civilian role under DoD strategic analysis. Officially, I was listed as a he wasn't just a mechanic. He once saved my life contracted research specialist. What I actually did was help assess foreign threat simulations and design containment protocols. Basically, how do we avoid the next global disaster? Logan knew some of it enough to respect the silences. He never asked for details. That's why I could be with him. He didn't need to be impressed. He didn't treat me like I was broken or dangerous or some story to be impressed by. He treated me like a person, a quiet, slightly guarded, occasionally snarky person, but a person all the same. My family, they didn't know a thing. They thought I burned out and took a desk job. My dad once joked that I was probably just making PowerPoints for some general somewhere. I smiled and nodded. Brianna used to say things like, "You know, if you just stayed in school, you could have had a stable job by now. I have 4 degrees. She knows that. She just pretends not to. But none of it mattered to them because it didn't look like success. No suits, no business cards, no vacation homes to post about. Just me living in a modest house with a man who wore steel-toed boots to work and drove a truck with a dented door. Brianna once asked me why I didn't go into politics. She said, "You're smart enough. You're just not very polished." I told her, "Some of us are more useful behind the curtain." She didn't laugh. She thought I was joking. The thing is, when you've spent most of your life holding national secrets, you get real good at keeping personal ones too. So I never told them how many lives I helped save, how many briefings I'd led, or how many times my reports had gone straight to the White House. Not once, because I don't need applause. I need peace. The only time I ever almost broke was when I visited my old unit at Fort Me last year. One of the guys I trained had just made major. He pulled me aside and said, "You know they still use your protocols, right? The Intel Fusion model, you bolt at standard issue now." I nodded, said, "Thanks," and walked out into the parking lot where I cried in the driver's seat for a full minute. Not because I needed recognition, but because someone remembered. And then I went home, washed dishes, fed the dog. Saturday, across from Logan, while he heard something about carburetors on his phone. and I felt okay. I don't talk about my past because it's not who I'm trying to be anymore. I don't need to walk into a room and be the smartest, strongest, most decorated person there. I've already been that. Now, I want to walk into a room and just be Caitlin. Just someone trying to build something better with the person she loves. Of course, people like Brianna don't see any of that. They only see what's on the surface. And when the surface doesn't sparkle, they assume there's nothing underneath. The morning after I finished organizing the final wedding details, Logan came in with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of gas station donuts. He always acted like that was some grand romantic gesture, which honest it kinda was. He handed me the coffee with the exact same look he gave me on a night patrol 8 years ago when we both thought we might not make it till sunrise. Logan's never been the kind of guy who talks about feelings unless they're tied to engine temperature or torque ratios. He fixes things. That's how he shows love. If I'm quiet too long, he changes the oil in my car. If I'm stressed, here seals the porch rail. When I broke down after a hard day last winter, he didn't say a word. He just made soup, handed me a spoon, and sat down next to me until I was ready to breathe again. To Brianna, he's just a mechanic. She said it like a punchline. What she doesn't know and will probably never care to ask us that Logan Miller used Toby Staff Sergeant Miller, U.S. Army Combat Support. He ran maintenance under live fire. In a sandstorm with half his tools lost and a Humvee flipped on its side, he improvised a repair using part of a jerry can and 2 belts. That repair got a squad of wounded soldiers, including me, out of an ambush kill zone. He didn't brag. He never filed accommodation. He just said that's what needed to be done. I didn't fall for him because of the hero stuff. I fell for him because the first time I invited him over for dinner, he walked my old Beagle invitations declined, judgments made, toxic family pressure, without being asked. Then offered to fix the dripping faucet. I'd been engaged before briefly to someone who wore cufflinks and knew wine pairings, but treated my work like a conversation stopper. Logan didn't do that. He listened. And when he didn't understand, he didn't pretend Toad just said, "Okay, tell me what you need." The first time Brianna met him, she gave him a quick once-over and said, "So what do you do?" Logan said, "I work maintenance at Boeing." She blinked. "Oh, so like planes?" He nodded. She smiled like someone who just found out the wine was boxed, then pivoted away mid-sentence. After that, she told my mom, "I just hope Caitlin isn't settling because she's tired of waiting." My mom tried to spin it as concern. "She's just worried. Logan's a nice guy, but he's not really what people expect for you." "What people?" "Her country club crowd. The family friends who only remembered my name when I came home in uniform. Logan's not what people expect because he doesn't pretend. He doesn't show off, doesn't name drop, doesn't care about appearances. And yeah, he works with his hands. He smells like grease sometimes. His fingernails are always half-stained with machine oil, but he's honest and steady. And when everything else feels like it's falling apart, he's the guy who keeps standing still. When we were planning the wedding, he didn't push for anything fancy. He said, "I want something that feels like us, not like a magazine shoot, just real. So we picked a mountain lodge with wood beams, big windows, and no cell service. The kind of place where people actually have to talk to each other. We picked the food ourselves. Pulled pork, mac and cheese, green beans with bacon. No filet mignon, no truffle risotto, just good food that wouldn't scare off your grandpa." He offered to wear a suit even though he hates them. He tried on 6, picked the one I smiled at the most, and didn't ask about price. I knew he didn't love how he looked in it, but he wore it anyway. For me, sometimes I catch him watching me when he thinks I'm not looking. Not in a creepy way, just quiet like Hestel can't believe I'm here. I know that look because I give it to him too. There's a kind of love that doesn't need fireworks or Facebook albums. It's the kind that remembers how you like your eggs without asking, that refills your windshield wiper fluid without being told. That doesn't flinch when your past starts leaking out in the middle of a normal Tuesday. I once had a nightmare so bad I punched the nightstand and gave myself a bruise. Logan didn't wake me up with questions. He just turned on the hallway light and handed me a cold pack wrapped in a dish towel. Then he sat with me in silence until I could breathe normally again. After that, he added a dimmer switch to the bedroom light so I could sleep with it low. He never said why. He didn't have to. Logan's not impressive by Brianna's standards, but he's the reason I get up in the morning and don't feel like I'm dragging a nanker behind me. He makes my life feel like something I actually want to live and not just survive. That's the part people like my sister will never understand. She married a man who brings contracts to bed. I'm marrying a man who once carried me through a fire zone and never talked about it again. There's a difference, and it matters. I sent the last batch of wedding invites 2 months ahead, complete with handwritten notes to the older relatives out of respect, even though I knew half of them would roll their eyes and toss them in the mail pile next to grocery coupons. I wasn't expecting tears of joy, but I also wasn't expecting the kind of responses I got. Aunt Doran, who once cried when Brianna got into Emory Law, sent back her RSVP card with, "Sorry, won't be able to attend. Best of luck," scribbled next to a passive-aggressive smiley face. No reason, no call, just a signature that felt more like a stamp of disapproval than a regret. Uncle Mark called to ask, "Are y'all doing like a backyard thing? I heard it's going to be casual." The way he said casual sounded like he was referring to a potluck funeral. When I told him yes, we were keeping it simple, he muttered, "She laughed at my dress." But she had no idea who I was, something about times changing, and then said he and his wife might not make the drive if the weather's weird. They live 45 minutes away. Brianna, of course, acted like she was doing me a favor just by showing up. "You're lucky I moved some things around," she said over the phone, like she was clearing her Supreme Court schedule. "Our firm has a merger we're preparing for, and Michael's arguing 2 high-profile cases this month, but we'll make it work." When I didn't jump in with gratitude, she added, "Look, I know this isn't really what people expect, but I'm sure it'll be cozy." Cozy asterisk, that word again. People keep using it like it's a compliment when what they really mean is small, underwhelming, and probably awkward. I didn't tell her that Michael, her high-powered husband, was recently in the local business section under conflict of interest allegations tied to a defense contractor. I figured if she didn't bring it up, I wouldn't either. We had enough going on. Logan and I were working double time to keep everything on track. We cut down our guest list, updated the catering headcount, and got a final quote from the florist that was somehow less than what Brianna spent on a centerpiece at her engagement party. I considered that a win. Then came the text. It was from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a while. She wrote, "Hey, just a heads up, Brianna called me last week. She said, 'Your wedding's going to be a lot more low-key than people realize, and that if I had other commitments, I shouldn't feel bad skipping it. Thought you should know.'" I stared at the message for a full minute. Brianna hadn't even bothered to hide it. She was actively dissuading people from coming. And here I was, still including her name in the program, still putting her in the maid of honor slot like this was some sisterly bond, instead of a Cold War with centerpieces and seating charts. I didn't reply to the cousin. What was there to say? "Thanks for letting me know. My own sister thinks my wedding's not worth her friend's time." Instead, I poured a drink and sat out back with Logan. I didn't cry. I was past that. But I told him what happened, and he just shook his head and said, "You don't need any of them." He wasn't wrong, but it still stung. Not because I wanted validation, because I was tired of the hypocrisy. Brianna could throw a 60,000 wedding with a string quartet and imported champagne and get praised for her elegance. I try to host something real and grounded, and I get treated like I'm inviting people to a picnic behind a gas station. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that people like her believe meaning comes from cost. That the more expensive something is, the more legitimate it becomes. She judged my wedding the same way she judged my job, my house, my relationship, by how well it could be displayed on a curated Instagram story. The thing that burned most wasn't the insults. It was the quiet withdrawals. The people who smiled when I invited them, nodded politely, and then faded out with generic excuses. Some of them I'd known since childhood. People I once sent care packages to while deployed overseas. People I'd comforted at funerals. People who hugged me every Christmas and told me I was so strong. Apparently, strength only counts if it's dressed up and photogenic. But I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just clear. Clear on who was real and who wasn't. Who saw me for who I was, and who only valued me when I could fit into their idea of acceptable. I went back inside, grabbed a red pen, and started slashing names off the seating chart. Not in rage, not in bitterness, just with the calm of someone finally done pretending. I pulled the garment bag out of the closet and zipped it open with a quiet breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The dress wasn't extravagant. No Swarovski crystals, no cathedral-length train. It was soft, structured, understated, a fitted bodice, square neckline, silk crepe that moved like water when I walked. I'd picked it for the way it felt, not the way it looked. That's how I do most things. Brianna insisted on a wedding full of tension and fake smiles coming to the final fitting, not because she cared, but because she wanted to see for herself. "I just want to make sure it's not too plain," she said, as if simplicity was some kind of crime against matrimony. The boutique was in a converted brick house in the Arts District owned by a woman named Janine, who treated every bride like her daughter. She greeted us both with a warm smile and offered Prosecco, which Brianna declined with a dramatic glance at her watch. I changed in the back, stepping into the dress with careful hands. When I walked out, Janine clapped her hands and said, "Caitlin, that's it. That's your dress." And I turned toward the mirror, not expecting anything. But there it was, me fully me. No uniform, no badges, no armor, just a woman standing still in something that felt like peace. Logan hadn't seen it yet. I'd kept that moment sacred. The only opinion I didn't need was Brianna's, but I got it anyway. She tilted her head and squinted, arms folded across her expensive blouse. "It's nice," she said slowly, dragging the word out like she'd just tasted something bland. "Very minimal. Are you going for a courthouse vibe?" I looked at her in the mirror, her reflection standing behind me like a disapproving shadow. "I'm going for not trying too hard," I said. Janine raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Professional to the core," Brianna continued undeterred. "I just thought maybe you'd want something with a bit more structure or sparkle, something to elevate the whole thing." "I'm not trying to be elevated," I said flatly. "I'm trying to be myself," she sighed. The kind of sigh you hear from someone who thinks they've failed as a mentor. "Well, it's your wedding. Just don't be surprised if people assume it's a second one." "That one hit." She said it with a straight face, like it was a factual observation. Like that dress and this lodge and this love all added up to something less legitimate. Janine excused herself politely and disappeared into the back. I could hear her muttering to someone about entitled sisters with no filter. Brianna leaned against a chair and scrolled through her phone. "So Logan's not seeing it beforehand. That's cute. Are you guys writing your own vows or just doing the classic version?" I shrugged. "We're writing them." She wrinkled her nose. "Oh, bold choice. You sure you want to risk public speaking?" I wanted to ask her if she'd ever been under enemy fire. If she'd ever stood in front of men twice her size and delivered orders while a drone hummed overhead. But I didn't because she wouldn't hear it anyway. People like her don't measure courage the way it actually counts. When Janine came back, I told her the hem was perfect and we were good to go. She gave me a look that said she understood far more than she was saying. Brianna tapped her phone and said, "Well, I have to run lunch downtown with a client. Let me know if anything changes." As she walked out, I stayed in the dress a moment longer, staring at myself. The air in the boutique felt a little heavier now, like her judgment had clung to the walls. But I shook it off. The dress was mean. The day was mine. She didn't have to like it. She didn't even have to understand it. Outside, I watched her get into her Karen-imported SUV that had never seen dirt and peel off with a practice turn that said, "I don't wait for anyone." Asterisk. I stood there a minute longer, listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that makes room for clarity. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was just done giving her the power to define anything about me. Back inside, Janine helped me out of the dress. Her hands careful and kind. "You don't need to worry about what anyone else sees," she said. "That dress doesn't need permission to be beautiful. And neither do you." I thanked her and meant it. As I drove home, I passed by Aberdell shop downtown with 3 mannequins in the window, all in gowns that sparkled so hard they looked like disco balls. I didn't stop. I didn't glance again. I just turned onto my "you're marrying" down. My sister interrupted the ceremony street, pulled into our driveway and hung the garment bag back in the closet. It was exactly where it needed to be. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before the sun even had a chance to rise. Logan was already gone off with his best man to make sure the sound system worked, that the chairs were set up properly, that the old church heater didn't decide to go on strike halfway through the ceremony. I stood in the window of the guest cabin with a mug of coffee and watched the fog roll across the mountain ridge. There were birds somewhere in the trees and the kind of silence you only get in the early hours before anyone has had time to ruin anything. The bridal suite was in Asmal's upstairs room of the lodge. Exposed beams, stone fireplace, simple but warm. My mom arrived first carrying a bag of hair products like she was prepping for a beauty pageant. She said, "Good morning," with a kiss on the cheek and immediately began fussing with my hair. "You sure you don't want a little more volume?" she asked. "I'm sure." She pursed her lips but nodded. "Okay, simple is fine." The hairstylist arrived. Then the makeup artist, then the photographer. The room filled with polite chatter and soft background music. People kept asking how I was feeling, and I kept saying I was fine because I was. Then Brianna walked in. She was wearing a pale blue dress that probably cost more than my entire flower budget. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry sparkled, and her attitude showed up 15 minutes ahead of her. She looked around like she'd walked into a yard sale. "This is rustic," she said. "Very cabin core." I didn't respond. She opened a garment bag and pulled out her bridesmaid dress. I'd chosen to be neutral, flattering, not too flashy. She held it up with 2 fingers like it might bite her. "Is this the final one?" she asked. "It's the same one we agreed on 2 months ago," I said. "I thought we were maybe going with the sage green." "No, you thought you were going with the sage green." "I told you we weren't." My mom cleared her throat, sensing the drop in temperature. Brianna shrugged. "Fine, beige. It is very grounded." The photographer asked us to step outside for a few shots before the guests arrived. Logan was still at the chapel. I hadn't seen him yet today, and I liked that. I wanted the first time he saw me in the dress to be when I walked down that aisle. Outside, the air was crisp, the leaves still holding on to the last of their color. Brianna looped her arm through mine for a photo and whispered through her perfect teeth, "You can still back out, you know." I didn't flinch. "You can still leave." She gave a tight smile for the camera. "I'm just saying there's no shame in realizing you've made a mistake. The only mistake would be thinking your opinion has anything to do with my happiness." Click flash. After the photos, we rode in a vintage Bronco up to the chapel. My dad met us outside and offered his arm, proud, but a little stiff in his old gray suit. He asked if I was nervous. "No," I said honestly. Inside, guests were already seated. A small crowd, not the overflowing pews Brianna had boasted about at her wedding. But everyone here mattered. Everyone here showed up for the right reasons. The music began. I stood in the back hallway just out of sight, holding my bouquet. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I thought about Logan, about all the small, steady reasons I loved him, about how every version of my life before him felt like a test I'd finally passed. Then the doors opened and everything else, Brianna, the whispers, the people who didn't show, fell away like dust from my shoes. My heels hit the aisle softly, each step deliberate, each breath steady. Logan stood at the altar, hands folded, eyes locked on me like I was the only thing in the room. For a moment, I forgot the judgment, the insults, the guest list edits. I was walking toward the only person who had ever made me feel entirely known and entirely safe. The chapel was quiet in that sacred way, like the building itself respected the moment. A few phones clicked, but no one whispered. The air held a hush like it knew something important was happening. Then came the voice, cutting, sharp, out I could have crushed her. But silence was louder of place. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous." Every head turned at once. Brianna stood up from the 3rd row, her voice echoing off the stone walls like a slap. "You're really going through with this?" My dad stood halfway as if to hush her, but she ignored him. She was already walking up the aisle like it was her runway, and the whole wedding was a mistake she'd been sent to correct. "You're marrying a mechanic," she said louder, spinning slightly so everyone could hear. A small town, grease under the fingernails, rent, a suit mechanic. The air tightened. Logan didn't move, but his jaw clenched once. Brianna kept going, her tone smug, arms flared like she was presenting Exhibit A of my supposed failure. "Look, I know we've had our differences," she said, "but someone has to say it. Caitlin, you're better than this. You graduated top of your class. You could have had anything and you're throwing it away on this?" She gestured broadly toward Logan like he wasn't even standing there with eyes and ears and a spine that had been through hell and back. "You're throwing it away on a man who probably makes what? 50 grand a year, maybe." Someone coughed in the back. Not a laugh, just discomfort trying to escape a throat. I glanced at Logan. He didn't break eye contact, just stood calm, solid, like the anchor he's always been. I could see the fury bubbling under his quiet, but he didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. Brianna turned back to me, tone shifting into performative sadness. "I'm not trying to ruin your day, but someone has to say it. This is beneath you, and if you don't see that now, you will. You'll be stuck in some tiny apartment clipping coupons while he changes brake pads," my mom gasped. My aunt put her hand to her mouth. "And me?" I smiled. It wasn't a smile of gratitude. It wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile you give someone who just handed you the exact leverage you've been waiting for your whole life. Logan leaned toward me slightly and whispered, "We could tell her." I shook my head, never breaking my smile. Not yet. Brianna exhaled dramatically and turned to walk out. Her heels clicked down the stone aisle, the sound practically applauding her departure. She didn't even make it to the doors before muttering loud enough for everyone to hear. Pathetic. The minister hesitated, clearly unsure what to do. I looked at him and nodded once. "Shall we continue?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Let's." And just like that, the ceremony resumed. No one clapped when she left. No one laughed. No one needed to, because in that moment, Brianna told everyone exactly who she was and exactly who we weren't. The vows were steady. The ring slipped on without a hitch. Logan's hand was warm in mine, steady and grounded. When he said, "I do," it wasn't a performance. It was a promise. We kissed. We smiled for the photos. And outside, guests began walking to their cars, still whispering about what had just happened. She really did that. I heard someone ask behind me, "Who says things like that?" Another replied, "They weren't talking about me." Back inside, Logan helped me out of my heels. He handed me a pair of sneakers I'd packed in secret. I laughed and leaned my head on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "She just made what's about to happen even better?" He grinned. "Ready for Act 2, I've never been more ready." The car ride to the reception was calm. Too calm. The man who changed everything walked in Jiven. The chaos that had just gone down inside the chapel, but Logan and I weren't rattled. If anything, we were both holding back laughter. She said, "Coupon clipping," I murmured, half chuckling, leaning my head on his shoulder as the vintage car moved up the mountain road like we're one step away from boiling ramen on a hot plate. Logan smirked, eyes on the winding turns ahead. And here I thought I had to tell my boss I couldn't afford the gas for our private plane. I shook my head and smiled into the silence. There had been moments before the wedding where I thought about pulling Brianna aside, telling her just laying it out, the rank, the record, the Bronze Star, the classified combination letters, my role in 3 successful counter-intels that she'd unknowingly read about in the news. I could have named every bit of it, but I didn't. Because if someone only respects you when you wave credentials in their face, that respect is worthless. And Brianna's entire framework for value was built on things she could brag about at dinner parties, letting her believe I was some sad little small town teacher about to marry a grease-stained mechanic wasn't weakness. It was strategy. There's a kind of control in letting people underestimate you reveals who they are without you ever needing to speak. We pulled up to the restaurant, and the Valatan older man in a sharp blazer immediately stepped forward and addressed Logan by name. "Mr. Miller, good to see you." Everything set, Brianna. If she bothered showing up at all, would be arriving shortly, and she'd walk into the kind of venue she'd sworn up and down we couldn't possibly afford. The Romano Ridge, a place she'd spent her adult life casually named Dropping In Brunch Stories. A private mountain restaurant owned by the Mitchell Group, quietly managed by Logan's uncle, discreetly passed down to Logan last year. Logan helped me out of the car, his hand resting at the small of my back. No crowd, no photographers, just staff moving with precision and ease, already trained to keep details private. The front doors opened and inside was a glow of candlelight, smooth jazz playing live, white linens, custom menus. It was everything Brianna thought she owned. The copyright toned. None of it had her name on it. As we walked in, a few guests audibly gasped. Not fake surprise. Genuine confusion. How'd they afford this? I thought they were doing a backyard setup. Isn't this place members only? I heard all of it and I didn't say a word. Silence was the most elegant outfit I owned that night, because the people who dismissed us now had to sit at tables with their confusion. They had to eat their catered shrimp cocktail with the taste of judgment still stuck in their mouths. The server's discreet, efficient moved like clockwork. Champagne was poured, dishes were served, and nobody said a thing about the incident at the church, though it hung in the air like expensive perfume. Logan leaned in close as we greeted guests, his voice low and calm. She'll come, I know. Think she'll play nice? I smiled, not a chance. But what mattered was that now, whatever she did next, the audience had changed. They'd seen her tear me down. Now they were watching a reality that didn't match her story. And I didn't have to lift a single finger. That's the thing about restraint. People think it's submission, but when used right, it's precision. I wasn't silent because I was scared. I was silent because I knew I didn't need to say anything. My life would speak for itself. Sooner or later, the room would catch up. I was halfway through greeting Logan's cousin from Oregon when I saw the staff straighten up all at once, like a silent alarm had gone off. Their posture, their hands, their eyes, they all snapped into the kind of stillness that only happens when someone important steps into the room. And then I saw him. Major General Warren Halbrook, retired, but still carrying enough weight in his name to turn heads in any room in the country, military or civilian. He didn't walk. He arrived. Crisp navy blue suit, polished shoes. That weathered face I'd seen command battlefields and Senate hearings with the same quiet authority. He was the man who once said I had the sharpest instincts he'd ever seen under fire. And he was also the man who'd watched me drag 2 wounded soldiers out of a shelled barracks while half of command froze. And now here he was at my wedding. Logan reached for my hand without a word. I didn't tell him Halbrook was coming. No one knew. My sister's world crumbled when she learned the truth. Actually, not even my mom. It was a favor he'd insisted on repaying after a mission gone sideways 2 years ago. And tonight, it was more than a favor. It was a statement. Gasps rippled through the guests like wind through tall grass. Is that no way? That can't be, holy crap. That's Halbrook. My mom's eyes went wide as saucers. My uncle nearly dropped his drink, but no reaction matched the one from Brianna, who had walked in 2 minutes earlier, finally making her fashionably late entrance in a new designer gown, only to freeze mid-step as she saw him talking to me. She clutched her purse with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Halbrook made his way to me, cutting through the crowd with the ease of someone who never has to introduce himself twice. When he reached us, he gave Logan a courteous nod, then turned to me and smiled. "Captain Shaw," he said, voice low and smooth. "You clean up well," I smiled back. "You're not so bad yourself, sir," he grinned. "Permission to address the room?" I raised an eyebrow. "You planned a speech?" "No," he said simply. "But I think a few things deserve clarification." He turned, not bothering with a mic. He didn't need one. "Good evening," he said. "Some of you may know me, many of you may not. My name is Warren Halbrook. I served in the United States Army for 36 years. I've had the honor of working alongside many great men and women. One of the best of them is standing behind me." He paused. You could have heard a champagne bubble burst. Caitlin Shaw served under my command in multiple joint force operations overseas. Her work saved lives, dozens of them. She's led classified counterintelligence units, advised military leadership on critical threat assessments, and personally de-escalated a hostage situation involving U.S. diplomats that none of you ever read about because she doesn't talk about it. He let that hang in the air. She doesn't brag. She doesn't post medals online. She just works quietly, effectively, with more honor than I've seen from most generals. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I watched Brianna's face drain like a sink unplugged. Her posture collapsed from upright elegance to pure disbelief. And when she told me she was getting married, Halbrook continued, I didn't just mark my calendar. I cleared it because she's earned more respect than most people ever will in a lifetime. And because the man she's marrying is equally deserving someone who didn't take a shortcut, didn't write a name, but worked his way up from the floor to the boardroom of one of the most respected aviation operations on this side of the country. People turned toward Logan. One of Brianna's old college friends actually gasped. And as for the rest of you, Halbrook said with a smile far too pleasant to be comforting, who had the nerve to judge her, to skip this wedding, to question her choices, to whisper insults disguised as advice. Let me offer a thought. He stepped forward, not raising his voice, but somehow lowering the entire room's confidence. If she'd wanted to, Caitlin could have written your security clearances out of existence with a phone call, but she didn't, because she doesn't measure people by power. She gives them a chance to be human first. And some of you wasted that chance. Silence thick and awful. Then Halbrook clapped Logan on the shoulder. Take care of her, son. Yes, sir, Logan said, not missing a beat. And just like that, Halbrook moved off to the bar like nothing happened. I turned toward Brianna, who was still frozen a few feet away, lips parted, hands still clutched around that designer clutch like it held her last shred of control. Our eyes met, and for the first time in my entire life, she didn't have a single thing to say. Brianna didn't move. It was like someone had unplugged her mid-glare. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes locked on Halbrook's back as he walked away. For a woman who never shut up, the silence pouring off her now was deafening. I'd spent my whole life watching her performance stages in rooms, at family events. But this was different. She wasn't acting anymore. She was unraveling. She turned toward me, blinking fast as if trying to reset. Karma doesn't shout. It waits. Her fall begins, whatever version of reality she thought she was in. Your weight, Captain, she stammered, her voice cracking just enough for everyone nearby to hear. My mother's eyes flicked between us. My uncle looked stunned, his mouth slightly open. Even the DJ, who had been quietly testing audio levels, paused what he was doing. Yes, I said. That's right, she scoffed. Since when? Since long before you decided I was irrelevant. She shook her head, grabbing a flute of champagne from a passing tray like she needed something to hold. Her hand trembled and she spilled a bit of it on her wrist. You never said anything. You never asked, I replied. That was the truth. She never asked me what I did, what I cared about, what I believed in. She just filled in the blanks with her own assumptions and handed me a role I never auditioned for. Quiet, boring sister in the background. Logan stepped beside me, watching her with a quiet kind of pity that felt almost generous. You should sit down, he told her gently. But Brianna wasn't ready to sit. She was ready to flail. You let me humiliate myself, she said, voice rising. You let me say all that crap in the church. I didn't let you do anything, I said flatly. You did that all on your own. You could have told me. I crossed my arms. Would it have changed the way you spoke to me to Logan? The way you talked to our family about us? Or would you have just pretended to be nice to save face? That hit her harder than I expected. Her face fell not in dramatic collapse, but in that small, quiet way that happens when someone realizes they've run out of cards. The guests didn't need to whisper anymore. They were all watching. She had thrown her tantrum in public, and now the truth was unwrapping itself in real time like our reverse magic trick. She couldn't stop. Antonio Mitchell, Logan's uncle and head of the Mitchell group, walked up behind her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You called my nephew a mechanic, he said softly. I was standing near the back. I heard every word. Brianna turned slowly, her mouth opening like she might protest. He's one of the few people I trust to run my business. Antonio continued. He didn't just inherit a name. He earned a seat at the table from scratch. And you dismissed him like a valet. Brianna blinked at him, lips trembling. I didn't know. Antonio smiled without warmth. That's the point. She stepped back, stumbling slightly in her heels. Her perfect posture had collapsed. Her tone, normally precise and self-assured, was now warped with something dangerously close to shame. I thought you were just as she trailed off, eyes back on me. Just a what? I asked. She looked down. I didn't press further. I didn't need to. She turned and walked away, only this time. It wasn't theatrical. She didn't storm off with heels clicking or toss her hair for effect. She simply drifted to the far end of the room and sat at an empty table alone. For a while, no one approached her. Guests made small talk again. Servers resumed circulating. The music kicked back in, this time softer, smoother. Logan and I took pictures. My mom hugged me and whispered something about how proud she was. My dad shook Logan's hand like he'd just been given a second son. And Brianna, she sat there barely touching her champagne, staring at the tablecloth like it might hold some answer. Eventually, one of her friends walked over, then another, but the vibe had shifted. The woman who had once dominated every social circle was now the one being pied. I didn't gloat. I didn't toast to her downfall, but I wasn't sorry either. Sometimes humiliation is the only mirror strong enough to show people who they've really become. And Brianna had just been handed a reflection she couldn't look away from. The party moved on without her. Dinner was served perfectly plated sea bass, truffle risotto, a salad that looked like it came out of a Michelin star kitchen because it had Logan had, "This wasn't revenge." It was her wake-up call handpicked the menu himself. Every dish tested by the executive chef at Mitchell Ridge 3 weeks in advance. I barely touched my food, not because I wasn't hungry, but because watching Brianna sit there in silence, shrinking by the minute, was oddly filling. People kept coming up to congratulate us. Logan handled it with grace, always humble, never correcting anyone who'd spent the past year judging him. Me? I just smiled and kept sipping champagne, watching the slow shift in people's expressions as they pieced it all together. Brianna wasn't invisible. Not anymore. But the attention she was getting now wasn't admiration. It was avoidance. The people who once flocked to her like moths to a designer flame were now steering clear, pretending not to notice the stain on the perfect evening. She tried once, maybe twice to stand up, maybe to approach us, but each time someone else got to us first. Guests who'd once dismissed me as the quiet one now clung to every story about Logan's company, about my work in the military. They nodded eagerly, asked questions, complimented my humility like it was a party trick. And Brianna, she sat back down before ever reaching us. By the time dessert rolled out, house-made tiramisu with gold leaf garnish, she'd stopped pretending to enjoy herself. The facade was gone. Her face, usually painted with practiced confidence, was bare in its discomfort. Logan leaned over to me as the band began playing a slow jazz version of At Last. "She's trying to calculate the damage," he whispered. I glanced at her. "She's losing. She doesn't know how to be irrelevant," he said. She never had to learn. That was the thing. Brianna had spent her whole life riding waves she didn't build. Every party, every spotlight, every compliment was borrowed currency. She never asked who paid for it. Now, with the spotlight yanked away, she looked like someone waiting to wake up from the wrong dream. Eventually, she stood. Not dramatically, just quiet, like a guest at a funeral. She crossed the room slowly and stopped about 3 ft in front of me. Her eyes were glassy, and her hands were wringing that clutch bag so tightly I thought the seams might burst. "Caitlin," she said, just loud enough to be heard over the music. "Can we talk?" I didn't flinch. I didn't even nod. I just waited. "I owe you more than I know how to say." I tilted my head. "Try anyway." "I was awful," she said. "To you, to him. I thought I understood what success looked like, what being someone meant." And now she swallowed. Now I know I had no idea. She looked around the room at the guests, laughing at Logan's jokes, at the wait staff treating him with quiet deference, at the old friends who no longer looked her way. "I thought I was above people who worked for a living," she said. "Like effort was something poor people did." Logan didn't speak. He didn't need to. "I judged you because I thought you had nothing," she said to me, "and I made sure everyone else did too." I waited a moment, then I said, "You're right. You are awful." She nodded slowly, not resisting it. "I know, and what hurts most?" I added, "You weren't even creative about it. All that cruelty, and you didn't offer a single original insult. Real power is quiet, but it lasts forever." That got a soft, broken laugh out of her. not out of defense, just exhaustion. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. But I needed to say it anyway. "You didn't need to," I said. "But it's good that you did." She looked down at her shoes, then back up. "You won't gloat." "I don't need to," I said. "You're doing it to yourself." Her shoulders sank, but not in shine. Something closer to clarity. Like the first moment, someone stops pretending and finally exhales. I turned toward Logan and held up my hand. "Come on," I said. "Time for our dance." He smiled, taking it. As we walked to the floor, he felt her eyes follow us, but not with envy, with something closer to grief, because the truth had caught up. And it hadn't yelled. It hadn't slammed doors or thrown glasses. It had just waited. And now it was standing in front of her, holding up a mirror that didn't lie. 3 weeks after the wedding, Brianna showed up at our building unannounced. She didn't buzz, just waited in the lobby until the doorman called up. I stepped out of the elevator barefoot, holding a mug of coffee, hair still wet from the gym. And there she was, standing next to the oversized bouquet of orchids she probably assumed would soften the conversation. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "Good," I replied, waving her in. "I don't fight unarmed guests." Logan wasn't home. He was in Arizona touring a new hangar. The space felt too quiet, too still for what was coming. I motioned for her to sit on the couch. She did stiffly, like she didn't quite trust the leather not to snap back. "This place is," she started, eyes scanning the minimalist design and wall-to-wall windows. "More than I expected." "That's the theme, isn't it?" She didn't argue. "I've been thinking," she said, setting her purse down beside her like a peace offering. "And I want to do something different with my life. Start over." My eyebrows lifted. "Because you got caught in a lie or because you finally saw the truth?" She exhaled, clearly prepared for this not to be easy. "Michael me husbandy's being indicted. Fraud, insider trading, the house, the accounts, even my damn handbags. All frozen. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to, she knew. I thought I had control." She went on. "Turns out I was just renting confidence." She paused, looking at her reflection in the black surface of the coffee table. "I need help." Those 3 words didn't sound natural coming out of her mouth. They sounded like a new language she was forcing herself to speak. I leaned back in the chair, sipping my coffee. "So, you came to me after everything." She looked up. "Because you were right about all of it. And I'm finally ready to learn what you've known this whole time." "What is it you think I know?" "That worth isn't what you flaunt. It's what you prove." That at least was a start. I stood and walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, pulled out a small key with a white tag on it. "There's an apartment above one of the Mitchell cafes in Cambridge. It's not fancy, but it's clean and private." She blinked. "You're offering me a place to live?" "Not just that," I said. "I'm offering you a job." She squinted. "In the office?" I let out a short laugh. In the kitchen, she recoiled slightly. "You want me to cook?" "I want you to start from the bottom. The same way Logan did. The same way I did. I don't know how to waitables." "You'll learn." She stared at me, the reflexive pride still fighting for air. "And if I say no, then you walk out with exactly what you came in with, regret and a purse full of bounce checks." She didn't answer right away. Finally, she took the key, turned it over in her hand. "And if I say yes, then you get a chance to rebuild something real slowly." Honestly, the silence between us was thick, but not angry, just unfamiliar. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." I nodded. "You'll hate it at first. You'll mess up orders. You'll get yelled at and your feet will hurt like hell." She gave a dry smile. "Sounds about right. But if you stick it out, if you actually show up day after day, you'll be surprised by how much you respect yourself on the other side." She looked around the room again, not admiring it, not coveting it, just absorbing that it existed, that I had built this life piece by piece without needing to scream for approval. As she stood to leave, she asked one last question. "Why help me at all?" "After everything I said and did, because revenge is cheap," I said, "but a good lesson that lasts forever." On us, she walked out, key in hand. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clear because this wasn't about putting her in her place. It was about giving her a new one she'd have to earn one shift at a time. Brianna showed up to her first shift in ballet flats. They were beige patent leather, still a little shiny, not designed for 12-hour days on concrete tile floors. By hour 5, she had taken them off twice in the break room, massaging her arches like she was in a hostage situation. By hour 7, she was limping, but she didn't leave. She dropped a tray on day 2, 3 waters, 1 Coke, shattered glass. She froze like a deer, waiting for someone to laugh or bark at her. Nobody did. The cook just shouted, "Sweep!" and someone handed her a broom. She cleaned it up, cheeks burning. It took a week for her to remember table numbers. Another 2 to handle the register. A full month before she stopped referring to customers as that one with the scarf. And somewhere in week 6, she stopped wearing lip gloss to work. Logan and I didn't visit right away. We wanted to give her space to struggle, because struggling is how people get stronger when they're not being watched like a project. The manager at that location, Sam, texted me a few updates along the way. She cried in the walk-in fridge today, got overwhelmed. She just broke up a fight between 2 dishwashers, surprisingly diplomatic. She brought in homemade muffins this morning and said, "Thank you for being patient with a beginner." One day, I dropped by unannounced. She was in the middle of expediting calling out orders, double-checking plating, hair tied up in a non-nonsense bun, apron smudged with flour. She didn't notice me until she handed off a plate and turned to grab the next ticket. When she saw me, she didn't flinch, she smiled. Not a performative pageant grin, just real. "You came?" she said, pulling off one glove. I nodded, had to see it for myself. "You look surprised," she added, half laughing. "I'm impressed," I said. Not surprised, she glanced toward the dining room. "I actually like it. It's real. Nobody cares what bag I carried in. They just care if their sandwich shows up on time. You've changed." She didn't deflect that. She didn't joke or self-deprecate. She just said, "Yeah, I know." Over the next few months, she worked her way up. She didn't skip steps. She didn't ask for shortcuts. She earned it. When the current manager got promoted to a new location in Chicago, Logan and I made the offer. "You've done every job here," he told her. "The team respects you. You've got a shot if you want it." Brianna's eyes widened. Not with entitlement, but with disbelief that anyone could trust her with something that mattered. "You'd let me run this place?" she asked. "Only if you think you're ready," I said. She nodded slowly. "I want it. I want to keep earning it." So she did. 6 months later, she wore a Mitchell uniform to a family reunion. Dark gray shirt, black slacks, embroidered name tag. She didn't change before showing up. She didn't try to impress anyone. She just walked into that house with her name embroidered over her heart and her spine straighter than I'd ever seen. A few cousins did double takes. One aunt leaned over and asked if she was working catering. "Nope," she said simply. "Just came straight from work." Nobody made a joke. Nobody rolled their eyes. It wasn't because they were scared of me. It was because Brianna no longer gave them any reason to. She walked differently now. Not like she needed to be noticed, but like she was fine if she wasn't. And that was the win. Not the wedding reveal, not the reception fallout, not even the apology. It was this, watching someone shed their armor and realize they'd never needed it to begin with. Logan and I kept things simple. Our penthouse was still clean and quiet. We didn't throw parties, didn't post about dinners, didn't announce promotions. But every now and then, Brianna would text a photo. A new special she created for the cafe, a barista she just promoted, a 5-star review from a grumpy regular who finally caved. Each one ended the same, still learning, still grateful. She didn't say it, but I could tell she was proud of herself. Not for the image, not for the title, but for doing something that had nothing to do with anyone's approval. So, who really won? Maybe no one. Or maybe all of us. Because sometimes revenge isn't about putting someone in their place. It's about helping them find a new one that's earned, not inherited. One that fits even after the shine wears off. And sometimes the greatest power is not what you say about yourself, but what others stop saying behind your back. The truth is, family doesn't always look like love and support. Sometimes it looks like competition, judgment, or years of silence masked by polite smiles. But when someone finally breaks that pattern, when they stop performing and start participating, it shifts the entire story. Brianna didn't become a different person. She became herself without the filters, the designer armor, or the status gains. That wasn't my revenge. That was her redemption. And honestly, it was better than any payback I could have planned, because the most powerful family revenge stories don't end in screaming matches. They end in growth. The best revenge stories don't destroy people. They rebuild them whether they deserve it or not. And family drama, well, sometimes it writes itself. If you've ever been underestimated, judged by your last name, or written off by someone who never really knew you, then you know exactly how it feels. And if you love stories where the quiet one finally gets the last word, hit that subscribe button now. This is the place for unapologetic truths, well-earned victories, and real-life revenge with a purpose.